"They abandoned me," a little girl told a millionaire. But when he saw the price of the cow, he was shocked. Watch until the end. Comment what you thought of this story, giving it a rating from 0 to 10. I really want to know if you like my story, and subscribe to my channel to support my work. I'm counting on your help. The rough rope chafed Lily's small hands as she clutched it tightly, sitting on the weathered wooden porch of the house where she was born. Her 4 years of life weren't yet enough to fully comprehend what had happened, but the loneliness she felt in her chest was all too real. Daisy, her light brown cow, stood patiently beside the little girl, as if she understood she was the only family she had left. 3 weeks had passed since Rick and Sarah, her parents, had disappeared without explanation. Lily vaguely remembered the commotion of that early morning. Whispered voices, hurried footsteps, a small suitcase being carried out of the house. When she woke up, she found only a hastily scrawled note on the kitchen table. "We'll be back soon, my princess. Take care of Daisy." But the days had turned into weeks, and the promise had not been kept. The pantry of the simple house was almost empty. Lily shared the last pieces of stale bread with Daisy, dipping them in the water she managed to draw from the backyard well with a bucket she could barely carry. The cow, which her parents had bought at the local market when she was born, seemed to understand the situation and grazed on what little she could find in the yard around the house. "Are Mommy and Daddy coming back today, Daisy?" Lily asked, resting her head on the animals. Warm neck. The cow let out a low moo, as if trying to console her. This conversation repeated itself every day, always with the same hope and the same disappointment at the end of each afternoon. It was at that moment that the sound of an engine approached on the dirt road. Lily lifted her head, her heart pounding with expectation. Could it be that finally? But the vehicle that pulled up in front of the house wasn't her parents' old blue Ford pickup. It was a sleek, clean silver truck, a stark contrast to the simplicity of the place. A tall man with graying hair and well-kept clothes stepped out. Arthur Sterling, 58, had taken that alternate route to avoid traffic on the main highway when he saw the scene that deeply moved him. A small girl, visibly alone, hugging a cow on the porch of a seemingly abandoned house. "Hello, little one," Arthur said, approaching cautiously. "Are you all right?" Lily hid behind Daisy, her large, frightened eyes fixed on the stranger. She had learned from her parents to be wary of strangers, and this man, despite his gentle voice, represented everything she didn't know. "You don't have to be afraid," Arthur continued, stopping at a respectful distance. "I just wanted to know if you need help. Where are your parents?" Lily remained silent, clutching the rope that tied Daisy even tighter. The man looked around, observing the obvious signs of neglect. Clothes hanging on the line for days, a half-open gate creaking in the wind, and most of all, the child's evident thinness. Arthur felt a tightness in his chest he hadn't experienced in a long time. Since losing his wife Martha 2 years earlier, he had closed himself off, focusing only on his organic food company. But something about that scene transported him to feelings he had buried, along with his dreams of fatherhood. "I'll come back another day to talk," he said softly, returning to his truck. But before he left, he placed a bag of fresh fruit on the porch. "This is for you two." Lily waited for the sound of the engine to fade before venturing to examine the gift. There were red apples, ripe bananas, and a bottle of fresh milk. She hadn't seen such appetizing food in days. She shared everything with Daisy, feeling her stomach less empty for the first time in weeks. On the other side of the wire fence separating the property from the neighboring one, Hazel watched everything with growing concern. The 72-year-old woman had been a friend of Sarah's and knew of the family's delicate situation. For the past few days, she had been secretly leaving plates of food on the porch during the night, but now she realized the situation had surpassed her ability to help. "That child can't stay alone," she murmured to herself, wiping her hands on her apron. Hazel had witnessed Rick and Sarah's hasty departure that morning 3 weeks ago, but hadn't asked any questions. Now she regretted her discretion. When Arthur returned the next day, he found Lily in the same spot, still hugging Daisy. This time he brought more food and a soft blanket. The girl accepted the gifts with less fear, but still kept her distance. "What's your name?" he asked, sitting on the ground to be at the child's level. "Lily," she answered in a nearly inaudible voice. "And her?" He pointed to the cow. "Daisy. She's my friend." Arthur smiled sadly. "Those are beautiful names. How long have your parents been gone, Lily?" The girl held up her small hands, trying to count on her fingers, but got confused. "Many days," she said finally. "They said they'd be back soon, but they didn't come back." At that moment, Arthur made a decision that would change both their lives. He couldn't just walk away and pretend he hadn't seen this situation. Martha had always dreamed of having children, and he knew she would never forgive his inaction in the face of a child in need. "Lily," he said with a firm voice, "how about you and Daisy come with me until your parents get back? I have a big house with a yard where Daisy can be comfortable." The girl stared at him for a long moment, her eyes reflecting the conflict between need and fear. Daisy let out a soft moo, as if approving of the idea. "Can Daisy come too?" Lily asked. "Of course. You two won't be separated." And so, carrying only Daisy's rope and a small bag with her few belongings, Lily left the house where she was born, not knowing she was taking the first step on a journey that would reveal secrets capable of transforming her life forever. Arthur helped her into the truck, while Daisy was gently led into the back of the vehicle. As they drove away on the dusty road, Lily looked back one last time, still hoping to see her parents come running to get her. But the house fell behind, silent and empty, guarding the secrets of a departure that had been far more complex than a 4-year-old child could imagine. Arthur's house was a drastic contrast to the simple home Lily had left behind. Located on the outskirts of Oak Valley, the 2-story property had well-manicured gardens and a spacious yard where Daisy could graze freely. However, for the 4-year-old girl, all that grandeur only intensified her sense of displacement. "This will be your room," Arthur said, opening the door to a room decorated in pastel shades. The bed was too big, the furniture too tall, and everything smelled of cleaning products. Very different from the familiar scent of her old house, which mixed the smell of old wood with the soft perfume her mother used to wear. Lily sat on the edge of the bed, swinging her little legs that didn't reach the floor. Through the window, she could see Daisy exploring the new environment, but the distance made her heart ache. "I want to be near Daisy," she whispered. Arthur understood immediately. In the 2 years since Martha's passing, he had learned to value the bonds that keep us safe. "How about we set up a temporary bed on the back porch? That way you can be close to her until you get used to all this." The relief on Lily's face was instantaneous. Together, they improvised a cozy corner on the back porch with mattresses, blankets, and a direct view of where Daisy was resting. For the first time in weeks, the girl managed to sleep through the night without waking up scared. The first few days at Arthur's house revealed both the man's kindness and his limitations in dealing with a child. He prepared nutritious meals, but didn't know Lily preferred her food cut into small pieces. He bought beautiful clothes, but forgot she had trouble with complicated buttons. Every gesture showed care, yet it also highlighted the gap between good intentions and actual experience with children. "Do you miss your house?" Arthur asked one afternoon as they watched Daisy graze in the yard. "I miss Mommy and Daddy," Lily replied, stroking a drawings she had made with crayons, a family of 3 next to a cow. Will they know where to find me? The question hit Arthur like a dagger. He had impulsively taken responsibility for the girl, moved by compassion, but hadn't considered the legal issues involved. What if her parents returned? What if they were looking for her? What if he was accused of kidnapping? That night, after Lily fell asleep, Arthur made some calls. The first was to Mr. Davis, his personal lawyer, who warned him about the need to register the situation with the proper authorities. The second was to the county's social worker, who scheduled a visit for the following week. "We need to formalize this temporary guardianship," Mr. Davis explained, "and we also need to investigate the parents' whereabouts. You can't just keep the child without legal standing." Meanwhile, on the other side of town, Hazel made a decision that would change the course of events. The neighbor had spent days tormented by guilt for not acting sooner when she witnessed strange signs at Rick and Sarah's house. Now she decided to go to the authorities to report what she knew. It was very strange that night. She told the county social worker, Ms. Peterson. They left before dawn with just one small suitcase. Rick seemed nervous, looking all around. Sarah was crying softly. "Did you notice anything else?" Ms. Peterson asked, carefully noting every detail. "A few days before, I saw a man in a suit talking to Rick at the gate. He wasn't from Oak Valley, I'm sure of it. Rick got very agitated after that conversation. And there's one more thing." Hazel hesitated before continuing. "That week, they received a large sum of money. I saw Rick counting the bills in the kitchen, with the window open. I'd never seen so much money in that house." Miss Peterson frowned. Family disappearance cases were always complex, but there were elements in this story that suggested something beyond a simple move or trip. "Do you have any idea where that money came from?" "I have no idea, but I can tell you that right after that, Rick started acting strangely. He seemed haunted, like he was running from something." While Ms. Peterson conducted her investigation, Arthur faced his own set of challenges. The social worker's visit was scheduled for that afternoon, and he felt as nervous as a teenager going on a first date. He had tidied the house, prepared documentation, and even bought new toys for Lily, hoping to show he was providing a suitable environment for the girl. "Mr. Sterling," Ms. Peterson said when she arrived, "I need to assess the conditions in which the child is being kept and better understand how she ended up here." Arthur recounted his version of events, how he found Lily alone, how he tried to help gradually, how she ended up living with him. Miss Peterson listened attentively, but her expression remained professional and impassive. "And what about the parents? Have you made any attempt to locate them?" "Not yet," Arthur admitted. "I didn't know where to start. Lily only gave me their first names, Rick and Sarah. We don't know the family's last name." Ms. Peterson made more notes. "We'll need to start an official search, and you'll need to register as a temporary guardian, undergo a background check, that sort of thing." During their conversation, Lily played in the yard with Daisy, oblivious to the bureaucratic complexities her situation had created. For her, this was just another day at the nice man's house who had taken her in. She didn't understand the legal implications, didn't know about the forms being filled out or the investigations being launched. "The girl seems well adjusted," Miss Peterson observed, watching Lily laugh for the first time in weeks as she tried to teach Daisy simple commands. "But we need to find her parents or close relatives. This is a temporary situation." That afternoon, after Miss Peterson left, Arthur sat with Lily on the porch. "Lily, do you remember your parents' last name, or where they worked?" The girl thought with the seriousness only young children can muster. "Daddy worked at Mr. Thorne's ranch. Mommy helped Aunt Rita with sewing." These were the first concrete clues. Arthur mentally noted the names, planning his next investigations. He didn't know that by mentioning Thorn, Lily had just inserted a man into the equation who would drastically change the course of the entire situation. Dr. Evans, the local veterinarian, arrived late that afternoon to examine Daisy, as Arthur had requested. "I want to make sure she's healthy," he explained. "Lily has a very strong bond with this animal." The vet, a 45-year-old man with decades of experience, began the routine checkup. But as he proceeded with the evaluation, his expression shifted from casual to curious and then to genuinely surprised. "Mr. Sterling," Dr. Evans said, examining Daisy's bone structure and physical characteristics more closely, "this animal has some very interesting peculiarities. I need to run some additional tests." "Is something wrong with her?" Arthur asked, worried. "On the contrary, there are characteristics here that suggest a very special lineage. May I take some samples for genetic analysis?" Arthur agreed, not imagining that this seemingly simple decision was about to open a Pandora's box of secrets that would transform not only Lily and Daisy's fate, but also place them all at the center of a plot far more complex and dangerous than anyone could have imagined. As Dr. Evans collected the samples, Lily watched attentively, making sure nothing bad happened to her best friend. She didn't know that, in a few hours, the results of those tests would reveal a secret that would change their lives forever. The test results arrived 3 days later, on a Thursday morning that began like any other. Dr. Evans called Arthur at 8 in the morning with an urgency in his voice that immediately caught the businessman's attention. "Arthur, I need to talk to you in person about the girl's cow. It's complicated to explain over the phone." An hour later, Dr. Evans was sitting in the living room, a folder of documents in his hands and an expression that mixed disbelief with concern. Lily was playing in the yard, oblivious to the conversation that was about to change everything. "Daisy is no ordinary cow," the vet began, opening the lab results. "The genetic tests revealed she is a direct descendant of an extremely rare Portuguese cattle breed, considered extinct for over 50 years. We're talking about genetics worth a fortune on the international breeding market." Arthur felt as if the floor had disappeared from under his feet. How much is a fortune?" "Conservatively, between $3 and $5 million. But depending on the interest from international buyers, it could be much more." The silence that followed was broken only by the distant sound of Lily talking to Daisy in the yard. Arthur ran his hands over his face, trying to process the information. An abandoned child, an extraordinary cow, and now enough money to solve all his financial problems. "Are you absolutely sure about these results?" he asked. "I had them confirmed by 2 different labs. It's unquestionable." Dr. Evans leaned forward. "Arthur, I need to warn you about something. This information is extremely sensitive. If it leaks, you and the girl could become targets for people who would do anything to get their hands on that animal." It was at that moment that Arthur remembered his own financial situation. His organic food company had accumulated a $2 million debt, taken on to avoid bankruptcy after a series of cancelled contracts the previous year. The creditors were losing patience, and he had used his own house as a collateral. "Dr. Evans, I need you to keep this in absolute secrecy," Arthur said, his mind already racing with the implications. "You can't mention this to anyone." But it was too late. At the vet's office reception, Brenda, the secretary, had overheard part of the morning phone call between Dr. Evans and the lab, and Brenda was the sister of Warren Thorne, the influential local rancher who had employed Rick before his disappearance. That same afternoon, Thorne received the information with an interest that went far beyond professional curiosity. At 52, he had built a cattle empire through methods that weren't always ethical, and the concept of a genetically valuable cow lit up lights of ambition in his mind. "Is Brenda sure of what she heard?" he asked his sister. Absolutely. They were talking about an extinct Portuguese lineage, millions of dollars, that sort of thing. And the cow is with that businessman from the city, the one taking care of Rick's daughter. Rick's name made Thorne smile coldly. There was a history between them that few knew, and it made this whole situation even more interesting for his plans. Meanwhile, Ms. Peterson, the social worker, was conducting her own investigation into the disappearance of Lily's parents. Her conversations with local residents were beginning to reveal a disturbing pattern. Several people mentioned seeing Rick extremely nervous in the weeks leading up to the disappearance. He owed money to someone, said the owner of the local bar. He kept saying he'd gotten into a mess and would have to leave everything behind. He'd just sit here drinking and muttering about powerful people who don't forgive debts. Miss Peterson noted it all down carefully. Family disappearance cases usually involve debt, domestic violence, or drug problems. But there was something different about this case, something that didn't fit the usual patterns. It was during this investigation that she discovered the connection between Rick and Thorne. Rick worked at Thorne's ranch for about 2 years, explained a neighbor of Hazel's. But he was fired all of a sudden with no explanation. The problems started right after that. At Thorne's ranch, the man planned his next move with the coldness of someone accustomed to getting what he wanted. There was a unique opportunity here, the chance to acquire an extremely valuable animal and at the same time get revenge on Rick for old grievances. I need to get a better handle on this situation, he murmured to himself, already formulating a plan that would involve blackmail, manipulation, and the exploitation of an orphan child's vulnerability. Back at Arthur's house, the businessman wrestled with a moral dilemma that consumed him. He looked out the window at Lily playing with Daisy, the purity of their friendship contrasting brutally with the greed that the information about the animal's value could awaken in ill-intentioned people. "Papa Arthur," Lily said, coming into the house with her hands dirty from the yard, using the affectionate term for the first time, a sign of her growing trust in him. "Daisy is sad today. I think she misses our old house." The innocence of the observation hit Arthur like a physical blow. How could he explain to a 4-year-old that her best friend was worth millions? How could he protect her from the predators who would inevitably appear when the news spread? "Lily," he said, crouching down to her level, "let's make a deal, okay? We won't talk about Daisy to other people for a while. It's our secret." "Why?" she asked with the natural curiosity of children. Because some people might not understand how special she is to you, and we want to keep her safe." Lily nodded solemnly, as if she instinctively understood there were dangers her young mind couldn't fully process. That night, Arthur barely slept. The numbers danced in his head. The $2 million he owed, the $3 to $5 million Daisy was worth. Lily's uncertain future. There was a seemingly simple solution to all his problems, but it would mean separating a traumatized girl from her only source of emotional stability. It was at 3 a.m. that his phone rang, the voice on the other end was polite but laced with a subtle threat. "Mr. Sterling, this is Warren Thorne. I believe we need to discuss some matters of mutual interest. Let's just say I have information about the parents of the child in your care, and also about certain assets she possesses." Arthur's blood ran cold. "How did you get my number?" "Mr. Sterling," Thorne laughed, "I know everyone in this region, and everyone knows me. How about we meet tomorrow for a civilized chat? I have a proposal that could solve a lot of problems." The call ended, leaving Arthur alone in the dark, with the terrible certainty that the quiet life he was trying to build for Lily had come to an end before it had even begun. Outside, Daisy let out a low moo in the early morning, as if she too sensed that storms were gathering on the horizon. Miss Peterson was awake at the same time, reviewing the case files at her desk. Something in the information she had gathered didn't add up, like pieces of a puzzle that refused to form a clear picture. The parents' disappearance, the seemingly ordinary cow, the lonely businessman who took in the child, all the elements seemed connected by invisible threads she couldn't yet identify. She didn't know that in a few hours those threads would begin to intertwine in a way far more complex and dangerous than anyone could have predicted. The meeting with Thorne was set for late afternoon at a steakhouse on the edge of town. Arthur arrived 15 minutes early, trying to control the nervousness that had been consuming him since the early morning call. He had left Lily in the care of Hazel, who had offered to spend the afternoon at his house, playing with the girl and looking after Daisy. Warren Thorne appeared exactly on time, driving a black truck with tinted windows. He was a burly man, 52, with graying hair and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He wore expensive but flashy clothes and carried an aura of power that made people around him move with deference. "Mr. Sterling," he greeted, extending a hand that was a little too firm. "A pleasure to meet you in person. I've heard good things about your organic food company." "The pleasure is mine," Arthur replied, wary of the excessive politeness, "though I imagine we're not here to talk business." Thorne laughed, a deep sound that echoed through the nearly empty area of the steakhouse. "Straight to the point. I like that." He sat down and waved for the waiter. "Actually, everything in life is business, my friend, even matters that seem purely sentimental." Arthur felt a chill run down his spine. "What exactly do you want to talk about?" "About Rick Santos and his family, about an orphan girl in your care, and about certain assets she possesses." Thorne paused dramatically. "Let's just say I'm interested in all of these elements." The waiter brought their drinks and quickly moved away, as if sensing the tension in the air. Thorne took a sip of his beer before continuing. "You see, Arthur, may I call you Arthur? Rick and I have an old history. He worked for me for 2 years, tending the cattle, general services, an exemplary employee until he started having financial problems." "What kind of problems?" Arthur asked, though he suspected he wouldn't like the answer. "The kind that arise when an honest man finds himself desperate for money and makes bad decisions." Thorne smiled coldly. "Rick discovered some irregularities in my business. Nothing serious, you understand, just minor tax issues, but enough to cause trouble if they reach the wrong ears." Arthur began to understand the picture that was forming. "And he tried to blackmail you." "He tried." Thorne emphasized the word. "He asked for a significant sum in exchange for his silence. Naturally, I can't tolerate that kind of behavior, so I offered an alternative. He would get the money he needed, but as payment for other services." The implication was not lost on Arthur. "What kind of services?" "The kind that requires a temporary disappearance until certain issues are resolved." Rick and Sarah agreed to spend a few months away from Oak Valley, working discreetly on a remote rural property, a sort of paid exile. "And they abandoned their daughter," Arthur accused, indignation rising in his voice. Thorne shrugged with calculated indifference. "They thought it would be temporary, a few weeks at most. They didn't count on certain complications that arose." "What complications?" "You, for example." Thorne leaned forward. "And your inconvenient kindness. And most importantly, the discovery that that seemingly ordinary cow is worth a small fortune." Arthur's heart raced. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Of course you do. My sister works at Dr. Evans's office. I knew about the test results before you did." Thorne took another sip, savoring the moment. Extinct Portuguese lineage, $3 to $5 million. Impressive numbers. Arthur felt trapped. "What do you want?" "Initially, the cow. Simple as that. I'm prepared to make a generous offer, say $1.5 million, enough to solve your financial problems with a considerable amount left over." "And Lily?" The girl stays with you, of course. I know you've grown fond of her, and she seems well adjusted. Thorn paused. But of course that would depend on your cooperation. Arthur knew a threat when he heard one. And if I refuse, that would be a shame, because then I'd be forced to reveal certain information to the authorities, like the fact that you're keeping a child without proper legal authorization, how her parents didn't disappear voluntarily, but were forced to leave town due to blackmail and coercion. The trap was complete. Thorn had constructed a narrative that turned Arthur from a savior into a kidnapper, and himself from a villain into a victim. Of course, Thorn continued with false concern, I could also contact Rick and Sarah, inform them of their daughter's situation. They'd be very worried to learn she's with a stranger. They might decide to come back for her. Where are they? Arthur asked. In a safe place, but accessible if I decide to make contact. Thorn checked his watch. I'll give you 48 hours to consider my proposal. It's a generous offer to resolve a complicated situation. He stood up, leaving enough money on the table for both drinks. Oh, and Arthur, it wouldn't be wise to involve authorities or lawyers in this matter. You'd be surprised how many people in this region owe me favors. After Thorn left, Arthur remained alone at the table, the weight of the words echoing in his mind. He was being blackmailed by a man who clearly had no scruples, and any false move could result in the separation of Lily and Daisy, or worse, the loss of his own freedom. When he returned home, he found Lily asleep on the living room sofa, curled up in a blanket, while Hazel knitted quietly in a nearby armchair. How did she behave? Arthur asked softly. An angel, Hazel replied. We played in the yard. She helped prepare a snack for Daisy, and then she drew while I told her stories, but she asked several times when you would be back. Arthur looked at Lily's serene, sleeping face. Even in her sleep, one of her hands was stretched out toward the window, as if trying to reach Daisy in the yard. The bond between them was deeper than he had initially understood. Hazel, he said, after the woman had left, do you know Warren Thorn well? Her expression hardened immediately. That man is dangerous, Arthur. Why are you asking? He contacted me about Lily and other matters. Listen to me carefully, Hazel said firmly. Thorn does nothing out of kindness. If he's taken an interest in you, it's because he sees an opportunity for profit or power. Don't trust him, not for a second. That night, Arthur stayed up on the porch, watching Lily sleep in her improvised bed and Daisy resting in the nearby yard. The weight of the decision he had to make was crushing. On one hand, $1.5 million would solve all his financial problems and provide security for Lily. On the other, it would mean separating the girl from her best friend and placing an animal that represented much more than money into the hands of a dangerous man. But there was something Thorn didn't know. That afternoon, while he was at the meeting, Ms. Peterson had made a discovery that would completely change the game. Reviewing old town hall documents, she found records of a real estate transaction that directly linked Thorn to the disappearance of Lily's parents, and proved that his entire story was a carefully constructed lie. Arthur's phone rang at 5 in the morning. On the other end of the line, Miss Peterson's voice was tense but determined. Mr. Sterling, I need to talk to you urgently. I've discovered things about the case that change everything, and you may be in danger. Miss Peterson arrived at Arthur's house at 7 in the morning, carrying a bulky folder and an expression that mixed determination with concern. Lily was still asleep on the porch, and Daisy was grazing peacefully in the yard, oblivious to the storm brewing around them. What did you find? Arthur asked, pouring coffee in the kitchen while keeping his voice low so as not to wake the girl. Miss Peterson opened the folder and spread documents across the table. Thorn lied about everything. Lily's parents didn't disappear because of blackmail or coercion. They were forced to sell their property to him for a fraction of its real value. What do you mean? I found the records at the town hall. 6 months ago, Rick and Sarah owned 12 acres of land in the rural area, the same land where they lived with Lily. Land that apparently contains valuable mineral deposits. Arthur felt as if he were assembling a puzzle whose pieces fit together in a terrifying way. And Thorne found out about this? Not only did he find out, but he gained access to confidential geological reports through contacts at the town hall. Ms. Peterson pointed to one of the documents. Look here, the estimate is that there are enough mineral deposits to be worth about $20 million. My God. Thorne orchestrated a systematic pressure campaign. First, he used his influence to make Rick lose his job at other ranches in the area. Then, he offered him work on his own property, creating dependency. When Rick found out about the mineral deposits on his land, Thorne turned the tables. Arthur studied the documents with growing horror. How? He created fake debts. He forged documents showing that Rick had damaged expensive equipment on the ranch. He threatened lawsuits that the family couldn't afford to fight. Miss Peterson took a deep breath. And when that didn't work, he resorted to direct threats. What kind of threats? Against Lily. Miss Peterson's voice was grave. I found a witness, the woman who works at the pharmacy. She overheard Thorne telling Rick that accidents happen to little children when their parents aren't cooperative. Arthur's blood ran cold, so they sold the land to protect their daughter for $200,000, a tiny fraction of the real value. And even then, Thorne didn't stop. Miss Peterson turned a page. After the sale, he kept pressuring them. He wanted them to leave town too, so they couldn't question the transaction or discover the true value of the land. That's why they disappeared. Exactly. But here's the part that changes everything. Ms. Peterson leaned forward. They didn't abandon Lily voluntarily. Thorne told them he would arrange for proper care for her through reliable acquaintances. He promised it would be a temporary separation just until they got settled somewhere else. Arthur felt sick, and they believed him. They were simple people, without the resources to question a powerful man. They thought they had no choice. Miss Peterson paused. But there's more. Thorne never intended to reunite the family. In fact, he planned to put Lily in an orphanage and then use that as another form of control over her parents. So why didn't he? Because you showed up. Miss Peterson smiled sadly. Your inconvenient kindness ruined his plans. And now, with the discovery of Daisy's value, he saw an opportunity to make even more money. Just then, Lily appeared at the kitchen door, rubbing her eyes sleepily. Papa Arthur, why are you two whispering? Arthur quickly stood up and hugged her. Good morning, Princess. This is Ms. Peterson, a friend who's helping us solve some important things. Hi, Ms. Peterson, Lily said with the politeness children show when they sense adult matters are afoot. Can I go say good morning to Daisy? Of course you can, but have your breakfast first. As Lily ate her cereal and fruit, the two adults continued their conversation in whispers. Where are Rick and Sarah now? Arthur asked. I'm still investigating, but I have leads that they're on a ranch about 120 miles from here, working in conditions close to servitude. Miss Peterson lowered her voice even more. Arthur, you're in real danger. Thorne isn't just greedy, he's dangerous, and now that he knows about Daisy, he won't give up easily. What do you suggest? First, we need to protect Lily and Daisy. Second, we need to find her parents. And third, we need to expose Thorne before he does any more damage. Arthur looked at Lily, who had finished her breakfast and was now drawing on a piece of paper while humming softly. The same tune she had been singing since she arrived, a melody about free birds flying home. Ms. Peterson, he said suddenly, I want to do something that might be risky. What? I want to accept his offer, but with conditions. Miss Peterson stared at him as if he had gone mad. Are you crazy? You can't give Daisy to him. I'm not going to. Arthur smiled for the first time in days. I'm going to make a counteroffer he can't refuse, one that will buy us time to find Lily's parents and gather evidence against him. Before Miss Peterson could reply, Arthur's phone rang. It was Thorne, as if he knew he was being discussed. Arthur, my friend, I hope you've thought carefully about our conversation yesterday. I have, Arthur replied, signaling for Miss Peterson to stay quiet. And I have a counteroffer. Oh? I'm listening. 2 million. Half now, half in 30 days. But on one condition. I want to meet Lily's parents in person before I make any transfer. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Why that condition? Because if I'm going to be permanently responsible for this child, I need the parents' official blessing, signed documents, everything legal and transparent. Thorne laughed, but the sound was tense. Interesting, very careful of you. I'm a businessman, Thorne. I don't do deals without proper guarantees. All right, I can arrange that meeting, but it will cost you more. Let's say $2.5 million. Accepted. Miss Peterson stared at him with wide eyes, as if she couldn't believe what she was hearing. Excellent, Thorne said. I'll make the arrangements. I'll call you in 24 hours with the details. After hanging up, Miss Peterson exploded. Have you completely lost your mind? We don't have $2.5 million. Arthur smiled. We don't need to. We just need him to believe we do. He leaned forward. Miss Peterson, this meeting with the parents is our chance to expose his entire operation. If we can record admissions of coercion, threats, fraud, it's too dangerous. More dangerous than leaving things as they are. Arthur glanced at Lily again. That girl deserves to have her parents back, and Thorne needs to pay for what he's done. That afternoon, while Lily played in the yard with Daisy, Arthur made several calls. To his lawyer, explaining the situation and asking for legal guidance. To a private investigator, requesting the exact location of Rick and Sarah. And to his bank manager, checking loan options using his company as collateral. Papa Arthur, Lily called from the back door. Daisy's acting weird today. She doesn't want to play. Arthur joined her in the yard and watched the cow. Daisy did seem agitated, moving restlessly and frequently looking toward the road. Animals feel things we don't, he said, stroking Lily's head. Maybe she senses that changes are coming. What kind of changes? Arthur chose his words carefully. The kind that might bring important people back into our lives. Lily looked at him with her big, hopeful eyes. Mommy and Daddy. Maybe, Princess, maybe. That night, Arthur stayed awake, planning every detail of the meeting that would soon take place. He didn't know that, 120 miles away, on an isolated ranch, Rick was crying silently as he looked at a faded photo of Lily he carried in his pocket, unaware that his daughter was closer than he imagined, and that powerful forces were moving to reunite his family or destroy it completely. The private investigator called Arthur the next morning with news that changed everything. Carlos Mendoza, an experienced ex-cop specializing in missing persons cases, had located Rick and Sarah on a ranch 110 miles from Oak Valley, but the situation was far worse than anyone had imagined. They're being held in deplorable conditions, Carlos reported over the phone. They work 14-hour days, sleep in a windowless shed, and their movements are restricted. They can't leave the property without an armed escort. It's practically slave labor. Arthur's blood ran cold. Were you able to speak with them? I managed to pose as a cattle buyer and got a few minutes with Rick. He almost broke down when I mentioned Lily's name. Arthur, they don't know if she's alive or dead. Thorne said he'd arranged for care, but never gave them any more news. My God. There's more. Rick told me they tried to escape twice. The first time they were caught by Thorne's thugs and beaten. The second time he directly threatened that if they tried again, they'd never see their daughter again. Arthur had to sit down to process the information. Thorne's systematic cruelty surpassed anything he had imagined. Carlos, I need you to do something risky. When Thorne calls to set up the meeting, I need you to be nearby to document everything. Cameras, recorders, witnesses. I can do that, but Arthur, this man has dangerous connections. Are you sure you want to go through with this? Before he could answer, Lily appeared at the living room door, wearing one of the dresses Arthur had bought for her and carrying a drawing. Papa, Arthur, I made a drawing of our family, she said, showing him the paper where she had scribbled figures representing herself, Arthur, Daisy, and two smaller figures on the right. These are my mommy and daddy. They're far away, but they're still part of the family. The child's innocence contrasted brutally with the sordid reality Arthur was uncovering. He hugged Lily tightly, silently promising that he would do everything to bring her parents back. It's a beautiful drawing, Princess. I'll keep it in a special place. Arthur's phone rang that afternoon, as promised. Thorne's voice sounded overly confident. Arthur, I've arranged the meeting with the girl's parents. Tomorrow at 3 in the afternoon at the Santa Rita Ranch. It's a bit of a drive, but it's worth it to settle everything at once. Can I bring Lily? That wouldn't be wise. This kind of business meeting can be emotional. Better to leave the child at home. Arthur saw the trap. Thorne wanted to separate them, probably to have more control over the situation. I understand. I need the exact address. After noting the information, Arthur immediately called Carlos and Ms. Peterson, organizing a plan that would depend on perfect timing and a lot of luck. The Santa Rita Ranch is isolated, Carlos explained. A single access road surrounded by dense woods. If something goes wrong, it'll be hard to call for help. That's why I need you in position before I arrive, Arthur said. Ms. Peterson, you're responsible for alerting the authorities if something happens to me. Carlos, I need you inside the property, documenting everything. That night, Arthur had dinner with Lily on the porch, watching Daisy graze in the yard. The normality of the scene contrasted with the tension he felt, thinking about what would happen the next day. Papa Arthur, are you going on a trip tomorrow? Lily asked, noticing his preoccupation. I am, Princess. But it's a special trip. I might bring back a surprise for you. What kind of surprise? Arthur chose his words carefully. The kind that could make you very happy. Lily smiled and went back to eating, but Arthur noticed she kept her eyes constantly on Daisy, as if she feared something might happen to her friend. The next morning, Hazel came early to stay with Lily. Arthur had only explained that he needed to resolve matters related to the girl's parents, without going into detail about the dangers involved. Take good care of her, he said, hugging Lily goodbye. Will you be back today? She asked, holding tightly to his shirt. I'll be back, I promise. The drive to Santa Rita Ranch took 2.5 hours. Arthur followed the rural roads, while Carlos positioned himself strategically using an alternate route. Ms. Peterson remained in town, with instructions to alert the authorities if she didn't hear from him by 7 that evening. The ranch was exactly as Carlos had described, isolated, surrounded by dense vegetation with a single access road. Arthur parked in front of the main house, observing the several men moving about the property. They all looked like normal workers, but there was something in their posture that suggested other duties. Thorne greeted him on the porch with a smile that didn't hide the underlying tension. Punctual as always. I like that in a business partner. Where are Lily's parents? Straight to the point, as always. Thorne gestured toward a distant shed. They're working, but I can call them in a few minutes. First, let's settle the financial details. I'd rather speak with them first to make sure they agree with the arrangement. Thorne's expression hardened slightly. Arthur, I don't think you understand the nature of this meeting. We're not here to negotiate terms. We're here to finalize an already established agreement. What agreement? I offered to buy Daisy for $2.5 million on the condition that I speak with Lily's parents. I haven't spoken to them yet. And you will. But first, I need confirmation that the money is available. Arthur realized he was being manipulated, but decided to play along a little longer. The money is in the bank, ready for transfer, but I'll only make the transaction after I've spoken with Rick and Sarah. Thorne stared at him for a long moment, clearly calculating his options. Finally, he nodded to one of the men who approached. Get the couple from Shed 3. Tell them it's for an important conversation. While they waited, Arthur discreetly observed his surroundings. He saw no sign of Carlos, but he knew the investigator was in position, documenting everything with long-range equipment. 10 minutes later, 2 employees appeared, escorting a couple whom Arthur instantly recognized from their physical resemblance to Lily. Rick and Sarah looked much older than their 40-something years, with worn-out clothes and the defeated expressions of people who had endured months of suffering. When they saw Arthur, the confusion on their faces was evident. "This is Arthur Sterling," Thorne announced, "the man who's been taking care of Lily." The transformation on the parents' faces was instantaneous. Sarah brought her hands to her mouth, her eyes filling with tears. "Lily, how is she? Is she okay? Is she safe?" Rick asked in a choked voice. "She's wonderful," Arthur replied, feeling a tightness in his chest as he saw the parents' desperation. "Healthy, well-fed, happy. She plays with Daisy in the yard every day." "Is Daisy okay too?" Sarah asked, and Arthur realized that even the parents didn't know the animal's true value. "Very well. The two of them are inseparable." Thorne intervened before the conversation could continue. "Well, now that everyone knows each other, let's get to the point. Rick, Sarah, explain to Mr. Sterling that you agreed to the sale of Daisy and to the permanent guardianship arrangement for Lily." The look of horror on the parents' faces was unmistakable. "Sale? What sale?" Rick asked. "You said this was just a meeting to discuss Lily's future." Thorne smiled coldly. "Things have changed. Mr. Sterling is interested in buying Daisy, and you're going to agree to it, just as you're going to sign official documents transferring permanent custody of Lily to him." "Never!" Sarah exclaimed. "Lily is our daughter." "Was," Thorne corrected with calculated cruelty. "Now you're resourceful-less employees, with no home and no rights. Mr. Sterling, on the other hand, is a respected businessman who can offer the girl a future you could never provide." It was at that moment that Arthur fully understood the trap. Thorne wasn't just trying to steal Daisy. He was trying to steal Lily too, using Arthur as an unwitting facilitator of his diabolical plan. The revelation of Thorne's true intentions hit Arthur like a punch to the gut. He looked at Rick and Sarah, seeing the growing despair in their eyes, and realized he was being used as a pawn in a manipulation far crueler than he had imagined. "No," Arthur said firmly, "I will not sign any document that separates this family." Thorne laughed, but the sound was laced with menace. "My dear Arthur, I don't think you understand your position here. You're on private, isolated property with people who can testify that you came here voluntarily to conduct an illegal business." "What illegal business?" "Buying a child, of course. $2.5 million for a 4-year-old girl? The newspapers will love that story." Thorne moved closer, his voice low and dangerous. "Unless, of course, everyone cooperates with a more civilized solution." Rick took a step forward, despite the 2 employees flanking him. "Thorne, you promised our daughter would be safe. You said you'd find a temporary family until we could save enough money to get her. And I did. Mr. Sterling is an excellent temporary family, so good, in fact, that he can become permanent." Sarah began to weep openly. "Please, we did everything you asked, We sold our land. We came to work here. We didn't cause any trouble. We just want our daughter back." "And you can have her," Thorn said with false generosity, "on supervised visits, on weekends, as long as you sign the papers transferring legal guardianship to Mr. Sterling, and as long as he completes the purchase of Daisy." Arthur felt nauseous. The manipulation was perfect, using his genuine love for Lily to force the family's separation, while simultaneously acquiring an animal worth millions. "And if I refuse?" Arthur asked. "Then you'll all have very serious problems. Rick and Sarah for child abandonment, you for kidnapping, and the girl will be sent to public institutions while the courts decide her fate." Thorn paused to let the threat sink in. "Of course, I could testify in everyone's favor, explaining it was all a misunderstanding, as long as the deal is concluded." It was then that the situation took an unexpected turn. One of Thorn's men approached quickly, whispering something in his ear. The man's expression changed immediately. "It seems we have unwanted visitors," he said, looking toward the road. "Someone's been asking questions in town about this property, and about you." Arthur felt a mix of relief and apprehension. Ms. Peterson had done her part of the plan, but now they were all in an even more dangerous situation. "Take the couple back to the shed," Thorn ordered his men, "and lock everything down." "No," Sarah screamed, trying to break free. "We want to go with our daughter." The ensuing struggle was brief but intense. Rick tried to protect his wife but was quickly overpowered by the two men. Sarah continued to scream for Lily until her voice faded into the distance. Thorn turned to Arthur with an expression that had lost all pretense of civility. "Now you will accompany me to town. We're going to get the girl and the cow, and you're going to sign all the necessary papers. Any attempt to seek help will result in very unpleasant consequences for her parents. You're crazy if you think I'm going to cooperate with this." "I'm not asking for cooperation. I'm informing you how things are going to happen." Thorn gestured, and two other men appeared. "Your choice. Cooperate voluntarily or cooperate involuntarily. The end result will be the same." Arthur realized he was outnumbered and had no immediate escape options. But there was one thing Thorn didn't know. Carlos was documenting everything, and Ms. Peterson had been instructed to alert the authorities if he didn't return by the established time. "All right," he said, feigning defeat, "but I want guarantees that Rick and Sarah won't be harmed. As long as you do your part, they'll be safe." The drive back to Oak Valley was tense. Arthur drove his own car, but with one of Thorn's men in the passenger seat. Thorn followed behind in a truck with two more employees. During the trip, Arthur tried to process his options. He needed to protect Lily and Daisy, but he also couldn't abandon Rick and Sarah. And there was the matter of the millions Daisy was worth. Money that could change the whole family's life if he could get it out of Thorn's hands. "How much longer?" the man beside him asked, checking his watch. 20 minutes, Arthur replied, trying to keep his voice steady. When they arrived at the house, they found Hazel on the porch with Lily, who was playing peacefully with dolls. The normality of the scene brutally contrasted with the tension Arthur felt. "Papa Arthur," Lily exclaimed, running to hug him. "Did you bring my surprise?" Arthur hugged her tightly, trying to memorize this moment of innocence before everything changed. "Not yet, Princess, but soon." Hazel immediately sensed something was wrong. "Arthur, is everything all right? You look pale." "Everything's great," Thorn said, approaching with his false smile. "Just resolving some pending business. Mrs. Hazel, it would be best if you left. Adult matters to discuss." Hazel's expression hardened. "I'm not going anywhere. This child is in my care until Arthur returns." "Ah, but he has returned," Thorn said, "and now we need to make some arrangements. Lily, how about you show Uncle where your friend Daisy is?" Lily looked to Arthur for guidance. He nodded reluctantly, knowing that resisting at that moment would be futile and possibly dangerous. She's in the yard, Lily said, leading the group through the house. When they saw Daisy grazing peacefully, one of Thorne's men let out a low whistle. Doesn't look like anything special. Looks can be deceiving, Thorne muttered. Get the trailer ready for transport. Trailer for what? Lily asked, concern growing in her voice. Is Daisy going on a trip? She is, my dear, Thorne said, crouching down to her level, and so are you, to a new, very beautiful house. But I like this house, and I want to stay with Papa Arthur, and you will, just in a different place. It was at that moment that Hazel made a brave decision. Lily, dear, how about we get a glass of water from the kitchen? I'm thirsty. Before anyone could protest, she took the girl by the hand, and they both went inside. Arthur heard the faint sound of a call being made and realized Hazel was trying to get help. Your men will get the girl, Thorne said to Arthur, and you will sign the transfer of ownership papers for Daisy, right now. And then you get the child, I get the cow, and everyone lives happily ever after. Thorne smiled coldly, except for appearance, of course, but that's a minor detail. Arthur looked at Daisy, who seemed to sense the tension in the air and was moving restlessly. In a few minutes, Lily's life would be shattered again, and this time he would be complicit in the destruction. It was then that the sound of sirens echoed in the distance, growing rapidly. Thorne's face went pale. What did you do? He hissed. Nothing, Arthur answered honestly. But it looks like someone else did. The sirens grew closer, and Arthur realized the situation was about to explode in ways none of them had foreseen. The sirens stopped in front of Arthur's house, and 3 patrol cars disgorged police officers and social workers who quickly spread out across the property. Ms. Peterson got out of the first car, followed by 2 detectives and an officer from the district attorney's office. Don't move, shouted one of the officers, pointing at Thorne's men, who instinctively reached for their pockets. Thorne maintained his composure, but Arthur could see the controlled panic in his eyes. Is there a problem, officers? This is a private business meeting. Private meeting, said Ms. Peterson, approaching with a bulky folder of documents. Mr. Warren Thorne, you are under investigation for coercion, slave labor, real estate fraud, and kidnapping. This is ridiculous. I don't know what you're talking about. At that moment, Carlos Mendoza emerged from the back of the property, carrying recording and filming equipment. I have everything documented, he announced. Conversations, threats, admissions of guilt, all recorded in high quality. Thorne's expression finally cracked. You can't use that legally. Recording without consent is a crime. Not when we're documenting felonies in progress, the lead detective replied, and especially not when we have an official investigation underway. While the adults argued, Lily came out of the house holding Hazel's hand, her big eyes wide as she saw so many uniformed people in her yard. Daisy, frightened by the commotion, moved closer to the girl for protection. Papa Arthur, why are there so many people here? She asked in a small voice. Before he could answer, Miss Peterson knelt down to Lily's level. Hi, sweetie. I'm Miss Peterson. Remember me? I have a very special surprise for you. What kind of surprise? Miss Peterson glanced at Arthur, who gave a slight nod. What if I told you we're going to bring 2 very important people to you? Lily's eyes lit up with cautious hope. Mommy and Daddy. Exactly. Thorne's reaction was immediate. That's impossible. They signed custody transfer documents. They have no more legal rights to the child. What documents? The detective asked, holding out his hand. Thorne hesitated, realizing he had incriminated himself. They're still being processed. Of course they are, Carlos said ironically. Along with all the other forged documents you use for your schemes. At that moment, a fourth patrol car arrived, bringing two people who made Lily's heart nearly stop. Rick and Sarah got out of the car with the help of a social worker, visibly shaken but free. "Mommy! Daddy!" Lily screamed, letting go of Hazel's hand and running towards her parents. The reunion was too emotional for anyone present to watch without being moved. Sarah fell to her knees to embrace her daughter, while Rick joined the family hug. Tears streamed down all three of their faces, and even some of the officers had to hide their emotion. "My princess," Sarah cried, covering Lily's face with kisses. "We missed you so much, so much." "You left," Lily said between sobs. "I thought you were never coming back." "We would never abandon you by choice," Rick said, stroking his daughter's hair. "Bad people forced us to leave, but now we're back for good." Arthur watched the scene with conflicting emotions. On one hand, he felt genuine joy seeing the family reunited. On the other, he felt the void forming in his chest at the thought of the silent house without Lily's laughter. "Mr. Sterling," Sarah said, approaching with Lily in her arms, "we can't thank you enough for what you did for our daughter. She looks healthy and happy. It was a pleasure to care for her," he replied sincerely. "Lily brought light to a house that had been dark for a long time." "Papa Arthur was very good to me," Lily said, "and he took care of Daisy too." It was then that Rick noticed the cow grazing peacefully in the yard, oblivious to the drama unfolding around her. "Daisy!" he exclaimed. "I can't believe you managed to keep her safe." "About that," Ms. Peterson intervened, consulting her documents, "we have some legal matters to resolve." Thorne, who had remained silent while being handcuffed, took the opportunity to try one last gambit. "That cow is worth millions," he said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Rare genetic lineage. You have no idea what a treasure you have." "We know perfectly well," Ms. Peterson replied, "and for that very reason, she will remain with her rightful owners." "But I offered $2.5 million, Arthur protested. "If she's worth that much, maybe it would be better for the family to accept." Rick and Sarah looked at each other, processing the information. $2 million, Sarah repeated. "For Daisy?" "Actually," Carlos said, consulting his own documents, "according to the international experts I contacted during the investigation, the real value could be as high as $5 million, depending on the buyers." The silence that followed was broken only by the murmurs of the officers and the sound of Daisy chewing peacefully. "It doesn't matter," Rick said finally. "Daisy is part of the family. Lily grew up with her. She's not for sale." "Daddy," Lily said, looking between her parents and Arthur, "can I ask something?" "Of course, sweetheart. Can Papa Arthur still be part of our family too? He was very kind to me." The question created a moment of emotional tension no one had anticipated. Arthur felt his eyes well up while Rick and Sarah processed their daughter's request. "Lily's right," Sarah said, looking at Arthur with deep gratitude. "You saved our daughter when we couldn't be here. That makes you family." "But," Rick added, "we have a different proposal to make." Arthur raised his eyebrows, curious. "You have business experience, you know Daisy's value, and you clearly love our daughter," Rick continued. "How about we form a partnership? Your organic food company, our recovered land, and Daisy as the foundation for a specialized breeding program." "A family cooperative," Sarah completed, "where Lily can grow up with Daisy, but also learn about responsibility and working as a family." The proposal was as unexpected as it was perfect. Arthur looked around, at Lily smiling hopefully, at Daisy grazing peacefully, at Hazel nodding in approval, and at Rick and Sarah awaiting his answer. "But you barely know me," he said. "How can you trust me with your business and your family?" "Any man who cares for a stranger's child and her cow as if they were his own daughters," Rick said, "is someone we can trust." As Thorne was led away by the police, still protesting his innocence and making empty threats, The new extended family gathered in the yard to plan their future. Ms. Peterson finalized the legal papers that would ensure not only the family's reunion, but also their legal protection against future threats. "Just one more thing," Carlos said, approaching the group. "The ranch where we rescued you is being investigated for slave labor. There are other people there who also need help, and Thorne had more land acquired through questionable methods." "What does that mean?" Arthur asked. "It means that when everything is legally settled, you may not only recover your original property, but also receive significant compensation for the damages suffered." The sun began to set as the family settled on the porch of Arthur's house, which would now become a temporary home for everyone until they could rebuild their lives on their original property. Lily slept in her mother's lap, one hand stretched out toward Daisy, who rested near the porch. "I think we did it," Rick said, looking at his reunited family. "We got through it all." Arthur smiled, feeling a completeness he hadn't experienced in years. "No," he corrected gently, "we've begun. The real journey is just beginning." And so, under the starry sky of Oak Valley, a 4-year-old girl finally had back everything she had lost: her parents, her best friend, and a future full of possibilities she couldn't even imagine yet. Daisy let out a soft moo in the calm night, as if she also knew that finally everyone was safe and at home. If you like this video, please subscribe to my channel. I promise to bring you videos every day that will make your life happier. Comment what you thought of my story with a rating from 0 to 10, and thank you so much.